This is a difficult explanation, convoluted, obscure, pulls together different strands from various sources, but finally, that they all have a theme, a common goal. I'll probably get confused halfway in the middle and forget what I wanted to say, and then lose the final conclusion. So I'm going to need a big coffee for this one. Because it's a whole package that comes together, there isn't a single place to start and then go to step 2, step 3, and logically arrive at the conclusion. Instead, you just have to just blast a hole somewhere into the package, and from that expand outwards in any direction. And so you have to hear the whole thing first before you can understand what the beginning was. Well, we'll start with the mystery. The 7th principle of the White Eagle Lodge is about the physical body becomes immortal. Now, the inner spirit becomes so strong, it spiritualizes the physical atoms of the body, and then they are immortalized, which means forever. Now, when I read that, it's just weird, because it means the highest spiritual ultimate goal is materialistic. So I just smell a rat. Okay, now we have to connect this to Jesus, because after he died, 2 things happened, not 1 but 2. First, he was resurrected, and then later, about 6 weeks later, 40 days, he was the ascension. Now, they're different, aren't they? The resurrection was his body, his physical body, whereas the ascension presumably is his consciousness, go to heaven, his spirit return to God. So this 7th principle of the White Eagle Lodge about the sanctification of the physical body, that seems to refer to the resurrection rather than ascension. Now, we know, you know, I know, everyone knows, physical resurrection is impossible. It's not natural. It doesn't exist. And it was invented as a sales gimmick 2,000 years ago to promote Christianity, the hard sell. In that world back then, when there were many religions and cults all competing for each other, how can I sell this religion better than they sell their religion? Well, we need some. We need a gimmick, a trick, some sales technique. I know. We'll have a resurrection. And if you join our religion, you can also get resurrected, physically resurrected, We're not talking about ascension of consciousness to heaven. No. Physical resurrection. Now, so it's a lie. But because this is the seventh principle of the White Eagle Lodge, that is a lie. Now, I don't know, do I? Because, I'm just a little guy sitting in a corner, a nobody, but I can see something wrong. I can smell a rat here. Now, we've got two things so far: the seventh principle of the White Eagle Lodge, the resurrection of Jesus, the hoax resurrection, and now we have to go back to the Old Testament, the Genesis, near the beginning of Genesis somewhere, and in there is the fall of Adam, the serpent, the Garden of Eden, the Tree of Knowledge, you know, the whole fairy story, the big one. Well, many scholars, they study that, and they find a meaning. They find that there were two bloodlines. There was the children of Cain, the son of Eve, but the father was not Adam. The father was the serpent, or Satan. So that's why in Genesis it talks about enmity between the serpent and the woman, and Cain was the first murderer. And who did he murder? A real human, Abel. So this is the serpent seed, the serpent bloodline, which supposedly, if you follow the generations, is the Jews. Jews, okay, who worship in a synagogue. However, they were the children of Adam, and that bloodline goes through Abel, and they are real human beings made in the image of God, whereas the children of Cain are made in the image of Satan. Well, no, hang on. It's not just the image. There's a belief that they are somehow more than just images. They are direct descendants. Let me say that again. Direct descendants of their fathers. So this would mean that Satan was a physical, organic entity who had physical sex with Eve, and a kind of bastard hybrid race, which we call the Jews. Meanwhile, according to this theory, God is not just an abstract mind of the universe or some spiritual force in the cosmos, but as a physical living organism, the living God, produced the bloodline through Adam and Abel, so that real humans are divine in source. Well, it all sounds a little weird, doesn't it? It's Christianity. It is weird. Now, it's true or it's not true, it's not important. There are people who believe this. They believe. And we're not trying to ascertain, is it true or is it all fairy stories? No. What we're trying to do is understand why they finally, they have this curious, perverted sanctification of the physical body. So if you start with the idea that Jesus came from a special bloodline that in its origin was divine, and that goes up through Abel to Adam to God. So physical bloodline, his blood, his DNA, is genetic. Therefore, his body is not just an animal body, it's physically perfect, because this is God incarnate. Not God's spirit come down into his body, but he is genetically descended from God. Well, this is what they believe. That's why today you have all these theories and conspiracies about bloodlines and the royal families, and Jesus got married and had babies, and then they're somewhere in the world today, and blah, blah, blah. So, this is why, according to their theory, Jesus had this resurrection, because his body is literally God in the world. Pure, perfect. So it has to be immortal, so he can't die, so he gets resurrected. And then we find this same idea is continued in the White Eagle Lodge with their seventh principle. So that's really the cultural background of where this weird seventh principle is emerged from. Without the judeo-christian background, it doesn't make sense. Now, if you believe that actually God physically, genetically implanted himself into Adam or Eve, and personally, at a physical level, started the bloodline that produced Jesus, if you believe that, and you believe in a physical resurrection, was actually real, historically, a historical event, if you go for that, then okay, the seventh principle of the White Eagle Lodge could be true. It would make sense. However, if you think all that stuff in Genesis and the Gospels is a kind of symbolic fairy story, a pretty symbolism that we find comforting and meaningful, in an abstract way, then the literal wording of the seventh principle of the White Eagle Lodge is suspicious, in which case, what is the real source of the White Eagle teachings?